This is Brown Truck. Brown Truck is a racing car that's not really a racing car because it's a truck, and it's not much of a racing anything because it's not very racy, but it is our odd, unlikely racing machine. And today is the first day of the Brown Truck Racing YouTube channel, and we've done a very racy header, totally professional. Brown Truck Racing, there's a picture of it. YouTube, subscribe, press the button. So this is a little overview of Brown Truck. So first of all, it's brown, and it's a truck, although the trucky bit off the back is not out at the moment, so it doesn't look like a truck. But it originated from 1928 and 1929. This is original Henry Ford scuttle and bits and pieces. So the bodywork's very original and is really, really old, as you can see. The chassis down here, this is a Model A chassis, either 28 or 29. I don't actually know how to tell, but some people say it's one or the other. And it's been, look, it's just an old farm truck thing with the most amazingly, rough welding for when it was, being fixed up to do jobs around the farm. But now it's a racing truck, and it's a winning machine. It's quite amazing, mainly due to this fella in here, which is a small block Ford engine with originally it had just under 400 horsepower. I didn't buy it new, so it's probably got less in there, but it's still got loads and loads and loads, and it's got loads of power compared to the age of the chassis and all that sort of thing. So it's quite a remarkable machine, and we're gradually turning it from a beach racer, which it did really well, into a hill climber. Where we live, there's lots of hill climbs, and also the big dream is to see what it'll do on a circuit, whether we can make probably the least racy of race cars actually handle. We've got a beam axle that's off a lorry. We've got, which is all bashed about, that's 1932, I think. So that's all, had a fair life. It's got the most ancient spring in the world, which is a mixture of all sorts of springs. I've got some disc brakes on now. I can't show you the gearbox. Gearbox is a nice racing gearbox, Doug Nash gearbox. That's actually away at the moment. Well, it's not. It's actually in another building, but we're waiting for the clutch to be replaced, and the flywheel. It was slipping last season, and we're getting hot spots. It's like digging in. So that's being ground at the moment. So that's we're waiting to pick that up, and then that'll go back in over the weekend. Also, the weekend we'll be finishing fabricating and installing the suspension system, which is this 4-bar location for the back axle. This is where the bed would be. If the pickup was on it, I'd be in it. That makes sense, which makes it quite unracy as a race car, but there we are. And that's an original 1929 piece of bodywork as well. This is all original too. So although there's some new bits, but there's still the essence of the truck that was built all those years ago. For safety, the MSA have given us a set of regs to work to. It's quite a confusing. It broke a bit of ground getting this the Brown Truck organised for motorsport, and they said that they felt that it was more of a sports two-seater pre-1968. So we worked to those regs, which basically means we have to have a hoop that goes over possibly 2 people, although unlikely to ever have 2 people. I did originally want like a Cobra hoop, but they said that didn't work, and that was just fair enough. So this is all up to the minute, cold drawn seamless tube tagged into the frame, and it's got right bang up to date the hands device. On motorsport helmets now you get tethers that go down, tether the helmet down onto a neck brace, and the neck brace is held onto in place with your 6-point harness. And the most important bit of the harness is actually this tube here, because the harness goes over there and is at the right angle, so that if you do have a smash, then the harness has got something to hold on to that's really strong. So it's actually really old, but it's got modern safety features, which is reassuring if it goes wrong, because who knows, it could do. And that's about it. That's where we are at the moment. We've got 2.5 weeks to go before our first event, which isn't really a speed event. It's Bromyard Festival of Speed, which is a drive around the town with racing cars and all sorts of interesting cars. So it's not high speed, but it does need to be there. The guys at Bromyard have been really, really supportive over the project and really enthusiastic with Brown Track and what it stands for, whatever that is. They think it's great, so I'm really keen to get it going for them. That's our target. Won't get all the jobs done, but we'll get it running and pootling around town. And the best bit is that they said that we can run on open headers, so no exhaust. So it will be really loud, and that's one of the best things about this truck, is the noise it makes is great. Can't wait. But starting from the front, I've been working at improving the joints really. So we've got really nice rose joints now installed on the truck instead of the older type joints. So we've got really good positive location, really strong, quite 16mm cap bolts are really strong. I fiddled around a long time working out, wondering whether I could put coil over shock absorbers within the body and hide them, because they're a bit of a fashion faux pas with hot rods, so you don't want to see them. And I thought it'd be really cool to have like an old-fashioned Formula 1 system, so a push rod and then a rocking arm which would then push, say, down onto a shock absorber with a spring, and then I'd have lots of choice of spring rates, so I could tune it and get the whole front balance. But it was really complicated and ran out a lot of time. And then a friend of mine who's really into racing vintage cars just gave me a bit of a sort of talking to and said, look, there's nothing wrong with the leaf spring. And my whole thing about the leaf spring was it's really difficult to get a spring rate for them. It's difficult to measure, because on a coil spring you just sort of squish it down and see how much it weighs on a weighing scale, and then measure how far you've pushed it down, and then you can get a spring rate and you can say, well, we want to go weaker or stronger. But with this it's difficult because it's so big, so you need sort of 2 weighing scales and a lever and another person. And anyway, I ended up breaking the weighing scales and nearly losing my face as it sprung out. So all I've done is taken the old spring and added another little leaf here and another one, I can't remember which one it is. So instead of it being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it was 7 before, it's now 9. I've got the options to, anyway, so that's quite, once it's sat in the car where the block is, it does seem to hold the car up nicely. And I've got options then to either take a leaf out if it's too hard, or if it's not hard enough, I can put these sort of brackets on and bind it together. Or the old vintage car way, which is really more interesting, is to bind it with this, I can't actually remember the trade name of the material, somebody told me last night. You can bind it and that increases the spring rate, so we can go either way, but it won't be very scientific. But what has come out of all this is that I've got some really nice rose jointed aluminium shocks off a Mod Sports car, which I think I can mount quite easily there, and they won't be visually offensive to anybody, I don't think. We'll get rid of the sticker, maybe paint them black. But then I've got huge amounts of so that I think is on so that's on the weakest, so that's quite good. And then you can got, I don't know, probably about 15, 16 clicks of variation. So that goes really stiff. So I've hopefully got lots of adjustability in the front axle, and to muck about with and play about with in the season. But the back end is probably where most of the work is going on with improvements to Brown truck this winter. So what we had before, which is really amazing, these work so well. The back axle was held on by these two hairpins. How do I do it? Just if I put them on the floor and show you. And this is sort of not typical. Yes, this is what Stinger Reed does when he builds his traditional hot rods, and this has had one. I don't know if this is his first one or not that he did in the 90s, but anyway, it's very traditional. So the axle is held on by these arms at each end like that, and it goes in a V, and it directs the torque reaction to the centre of the car. And they're quite simple, and really effective, and they're very good at promoting traction, really, which is ideal because the hot rod's all about drag racing, and this one particularly was about beach racing, which essentially is a straight line run, and it's all about getting power down into the sand and managing grip so you go as fast as possible. And this worked really well. Brilliant system. The car ran 4 Pendines absolutely straight. It would hardly get out of shape. It was nice to drive. Put the big powerful motor in, and you've got 400 horsepower trying to go down through skinny little tyres into something as sort of transient as sand, which is quite hard but still moves around. And so you've got the engine sort of spinning that way, so you've got the reaction going that way. So you've got a natural tendency for the car to want to veer. Then you've got maybe softer sand that you hit or wetter sand, so you've got a little bit of sling. But basically you want it to go in a straight line for as long as possible so you can go as fast as possible. And this worked well. But now we're getting more into corners and hill climbs and potentially doing some circuit racing with the old truck. There's not enough, in my mind anyway, lateral support to stop the axle doing that across the car. So I cut these off the other day, and got a really good pal in our local town that runs our spare shop, who's like a hot rod, as in not traditional hot rod racing on cinder, and also grass track racing, who has sort of straightened me out on a load of things. And basically that stands me in, I think, at about 22 quid. So that's a cheaper joint, rose joint for a race car, incredibly strong, cheaper than I can buy from the old Ford shop. 2 of those and a little bit of CDS tubing, and I'm in for about 50 quid an arm. And I'm building what's called a 4-bar to hold the back axle on. We've got, so that's the top arm. The bottom arm is a really long one that goes from the bottom of the axle here all the way to the chassis here. And then the top arm, I'm just mocking it up at the moment, goes in. I've got some bolts actually that I bought the other day. Where have they gone? Can't put my hand on them anyway. I'll just place that there. So that goes there. That's the top arm. And basically how it works is that if you've got... How did I do it earlier? So if my lower arm is the bottom arm of the suspension, this is the top parallel arm, and my elbow is the axle. As the axle hits the bump, it goes up like that, and it holds the axle in a sort of an upright plane. So it can bounce along like that, but it can't go backwards or forwards, so it can't lengthen or shorten the wheelbase as it goes around a corner. So you get very, very stable axle control in a straight line and bumping, and with the addition of something like a panhard rod, you can stop the axle going across the car like that as well. And that's important because that's the instrument that sort of directs the power from the motor to the wheels, really. So if you can you can sort of eliminate unwanted movements in the axle, then you can make the car more predictable, and then you can dial in to different ways of controlling the tyres on the tarmac and the bounce and the grip. All this is ridiculously academic because it's an old shitty hot rod that will never win anything ever again in its life. But the whole, you never know. So you've got to try. You've got to try and think through these things and try and work out what the best is for the truck, even though it's not. It's the most unnatural race car. But if it's a difference between sort of being a pantomime horse at the back of a race and being, having not been at the back of the race, then that's great. It's worth the effort, and for my my inquisitiveness about how to make things and make things work, it sort of ticks off loads of boxes for me. So that's sort of the back and the forward control of the axle, and then to stop it, obviously as you're sort of driving around a corner, say we're turning to the right, the car there's a weight transfer. It's sort of going to lean a bit over on this tyre. This will be the outside tyre of the corner, so there'll be more weight going on that tyre. And the natural, if it could, it would the axle would push and move on the between the axle. The tyres would move around between the axle and the chassis. So we need to try and stop it moving sideways, because again, we don't want any sort of jiggling going on. We want it to stay exactly where we want it, and the power to be sort of, we know where it's going, rather than it bouncing around, you're losing energy and grip. And so what it had before, with the old Pendine system thing, whatever, was we had these that we talked about before, which sort of located the axle backwards and forwards. And then we had this, which is called a panhard rod, which attaches to one end of the chassis, and then one end goes on the axle. And basically it holds the axle and stops it going sideways because it's solid, which is a really good basic system. Again, but for drag racing, actually for most jobs, it's really a really simple, very lightweight way of stopping the axle moving across the car. So that was good. Did that, but I've always been intrigued with with the work of a guy called Colonel Arthur Mallock, who was the brains behind Mallock Sports Cars, and he would develop every season. His cars would have some tweaks in, and he would, you'd take your car back to his factory and he'd put the tweaks in, and then generally his cars, when the series they were running in, through continuous development. And one of these things was this thing called a Mumford link, which I've looked at since I was a kid. I've looked at these diagrams and tried to work out, and sort of half understood and then not really understood how things work. But he came out with this system that does away with this. It looks a lot more complicated, and I can only show you on a piece of paper because I haven't made it yet. But basically it holds the axle sideways, but it makes a thing called a roll centre really low. So rather than, how am I going to explain this? Rather than big heavy thing like a stagecoach rocking about like that we'd see in a like a cowboy film, if the roll center is low on the ground, then it rocks about a lower plate. It's moving pivots, I suppose, leverage, that sort of thing. Anyway, I'm really intrigued to do this. Whether I actually get it done, I don't know. That's the object of my desire. Basically, these lines here represent the wheels. That thin line there represents the axle. These are the two mounting points on the axle. And then through a bit of sort of, it's not trigonometry, is it? It's levers. It is trigonometry. It controls the movement of the axle sideways by letting it move up and down. But the important thing is it directs the lines of forces into a low, they're tiny little thing, roll center, really low on the ground, actually at base level. So don't shoot me down if ever you meet me and the car handles like a joke, but I've made every effort to try and make this handle as well as any sports car. Apart from, I don't fully understand everything, and I'm only actually a welder at the end of the day, and not a mathematician, so I may well have missed out something, but it won't be for want of trying, and you never know, it might give the brown truck that little bit of lead that, or help it keep surprising me, surprising everybody really. So, despite the best intentions and huge amounts of research and lots of measuring, cutting and stuff, you still make mistakes, and it must have been a result of of a late night. Anyway, it was definitely the end of the day, and I cut my brackets out for the 4-bar, and I got this one, and I sort of tacked them in place, and I packed them apart with various washers to make it, and I thought that looks great. I can put that there. That's probably be where it'll end up. And I was busy. The next thing was to try and work out how I was going to do the bracket on the other end. Yeah, basically what I've done is there's the bracket for the lower arm, and I've lined it up to be straight in line with the chassis leg, but that will show you in a moment. That then clashes, those two come together. So what I've got to do to cure that is just knock the tabs off here and move it over to here so that the arm will run sort of within the boundaries or the borders of the chassis rather than here. It was my idea to try and get as much sort of width really to control the axle, but it's not going to work that way. And the only other thing would have been to have had that 4-bar on the outside of the chassis, running parallel to the top one. But the problem there is I don't know actually exactly, but I think I need a load of room on that section of the car to run the exhausts. And I don't really want exhaust heat near these joints because they've got like a nylon in, and they can fail quite quickly if they've got lots of heat. So I'm probably maybe worrying about nothing, but was just thinking in my planning head.
Okay, Rolly.
So yeah, maybe easier to see on this side. That's the inner bracket there, and if that one it moved up 18 mil, it would be bashing into the chassis. So that's the problem there. So I want to move that. Well, one solution is to move the whole bracket in there. Another solution would be to trim off the back of the chassis and then put a big loop in here so it's got plenty of room to move. Or move the chassis, the axle back, which you can do on these adjusters here, by pushing the axle back. But I think I'm going to move the brackets. I think That looks like the most straightforward. Sometimes just snag, they're so thin and they cut metal really quickly. Oh look, it's even broken now. That was just snagging, but you have to be careful when you're sort of putting them on the floor, say the grinder you finished cutting. And if you drop it, and you can just sort of dent the edge and don't notice it, and the next thing it sort of causes a fracture and then they fly apart. And yeah, take your eye out. No, I'm in Bodnum, I'm not going to make it in. I'll be in first thing in the morning, that'll be good. No worries, I'll see you then, thank you. Cheers, bye. Well, you saved yourself a ride from hell in my car. So I was just seeing if the machine shop had finished grinding the flywheel for the truck, but they haven't. Well, they have. They finished it, but they close at 4:30 and it's 4:20, and we're 8 miles plus a little bit of Hereford traffic. We thought it might be able to make it, but it's not worth it, so rushing into town. So tomorrow, pick up the flywheel, which has been skimmed. It's quite interesting, actually. The power in the truck, and doing a few burnouts over the last few years, really, retro rides and Chelsea, there's like you could see hot spots that are dug out in the face of the flywheel. So they're being machined off flat, because it was like the surface was a bit lumpy. So that should be flat. We've got a new clutch coming. This is the old clutch over here. We've got a new clutch coming from Real Steel. And that's just, it's pretty worn out. And you just can't take a chance, really. This is a McLeod 3-leg clutch. And it'll be a new release bearing. That'll be okay. That's the clutch arm. And it all goes in this hole here, which I walk around the other side, you point in there. There's a big hole behind the engine. That's the end of the crankshaft. So these 6 bolts attach the flywheel, and on the flywheel is a sort of a gear ring, which is what attaches actually to the starter motor. So when you press the button, it spins the starter motor and turns this gear around and spins the engine, and then it goes. The clutch is a joining mechanism between the engine and the gearbox, and it provides a sort of a cut-off so that you can disconnect the engine from the gearbox, so you can change gear. And this is, because it's quite a fruity engine, quite powerful, it's got to be a really heavy-duty clutch. And the bits and pieces come to about, I think the clutch is going to cost in bits about 500 quid, maybe 600 quid to change. But there's no point putting in cheap bits, because you'll only find out they're cheap when they break. So they're putting the best parts. So that'll be good. Over the weekend, it'd be great to get the gearbox back in, sat in its correct place. That'll bring the weight of the car down to somewhere more normal. So I'll actually be able to finish the ride heights, or work with more accurate ride heights. I don't know if you remember earlier, I was thinking about possibly moving the back axle backwards to get a bit of extra room. And the only problem then that might be that the prop shaft, I think it'll be fine, prop shaft may, if I move back an inch, then that means that the prop shaft comes out the tail end of the gearbox another inch. There's plenty of room, but that's something just to be borne in mind, that you moving bits and pieces around and then it has an effect on something else. So I definitely don't want to be buying a new prop shaft or having a longer one made, because that's going to be huge. Oh, that's not huge amounts of money, but it's another load of hundreds rather than spending a few hours cutting and welding and fixing in the workshop. So that's it really. Today we're sort of up to date. Got the front suspensions decided, got the back suspension going in. I've made a mistake, but that's going to be sorted over the weekend. And we've got the exciting package coming of a new clutch, skim flywheel, gearbox back in, Sunday night. What are we on now? Thursday night. So 3 good days, hopefully, and those will be ready. And then I'll be a bit more confident about making Bromyard, which is our first date. So there we go. Fingers crossed, working hard. Thanks for watching Brown Truck Racing's video. See you next time. If you like the video, click the like button. Even better, click the subscribe button. We'll be back next time. I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks. Bye. Bye. Hey, off you go. Where you go?